Okay, I'm just setting up the live stream. Shouldn't be too long. And opening up the notes for the aeroplane. So this is going to be fun. I'm at a small farm north of White Sands called Beckett Farm, which I thought was rather fortuitous. Let me just check the volume levels. Yeah, volume's looking good. Okay, so I'm going to hang on for a moment. And should we go to the drone camera and give you some idea just how big and desolate the landscape is out here. So this is Beckett Farm. You can see this tiny little airstrip in the middle of nowhere. Should we move the time and move it to early in the morning? Make it a bit prettier, because at the moment it's 3:30 in the afternoon. There we go. So we've got the sun just coming up over the desert in the distance. Okay, so we are going to take off from Beckett Farm, fly to White Sands, and then we're going to fly up to Socorro and then over to Roswell. And the main aim for doing it is to go and have a look at the crash sites of the supposed UFO incident, both at Socorro and at Roswell. So I've marked them out on the map. I've done a bit of research to figure out where they were. So we are here. So I'm just going to get rid of this. So we are here at Beckett Farm, and we're going to fly over to Holloman first, and then fly over the White Sands missile range, just have a nose at it really. We could go and look at the Spaceport as well while we're here, couldn't we? So if we add that to our route. And we'll also put these runways on our route. So there was a small airfield here called Truth or Consequences Municipal, which I couldn't resist putting in because it looked really interesting. And once we've had a look at Truth or Consequences, we're going to fly up towards Socorro Municipal. And we've got an exact location here on the map. If you zoom in far enough, look, the label suddenly appears. So this is the location of what's known as the Lonnie Zamora incident, where a policeman saw a spaceship take off, basically, in the 1960s. And then we're going to head over towards Corona. So we'll go and have a look at the town. But then we head off into the fields. And you'll notice this is in an almost straight line from Corona. There are two sites. There's a debris field, which I've marked on the map. Obviously, there's nothing on the Google map. But if you zoom in far enough, you get the Roswell UAP landing site. Well, it wasn't really a landing site. It was a crashed craft, supposedly. Now, I think there is a memorial there on the ground now. So we'll find that out when we get there. And then we're going to head over to Roswell itself, so we'll go and circle the town and then go and land at the airfield. But yeah, it should be interesting. I'll talk a little bit about the various incidents on the way. So Mohammed is asking what are the specs of my machine. It's a NVIDIA 3080 RTX. The notes are always in the video notes. So if you go and look at open out the notes of the live stream, it'll be down the bottom. It's the spec of the machine. Okay, should we go and get the airplane up and running? Okay, so we've got the Coronado Beechcraft V35 Bonanza. And we're going to work through the checklist with you. So I've just updated this today. I put it out on the blog that I've updated the checklist for this, or written a checklist for it at last. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure the parking brake is on. It is on. So then we go and look. We'll just remove the yoke so we can do this fairly easily. So we've got the left tank is being used, and cowl flaps have to be open, so that's the cowl flaps. You pull them to open the cowl flaps. I'm going to turn the beacon light on before we even get power. So the switch is down here. We're going to put the beacon light on. And then make sure mixture is rich. Make sure propeller is on max RPM. It is. Make sure the throttle is open. I'm just going to do that again. Make sure the throttle is open 1/2 inch. So then we can go and put the battery to on. Turn the alternator on. And start the engine. So obviously you're going to see the RPM come to life, and we'll open the throttle enough to get 1000 RPM. Now, because we are at altitude, I'm going to have to lean the mixture out immediately. So we'll do that here. So you should see, as we lean it out, you should see the RPM. Actually, it's losing some RPM now. That's interesting. That's better. Okay, so we keep an eye on these engine gauges to make sure that the needles are heading into the green, and they are. You can see the cylinder temperature slowly increasing. Oil temperature seems to have settled. Oil pressure is good, and we are charging on the amps. Okay, so then we can power up the avionics. So Mohammed is asking what frames per second I'm getting. I cap the simulator at 30 frames a second. I don't get involved in the idiocy of trying to go for frames per second. I can't see the point. I've got VSync switched on and I've capped it at 30 frames a second. That's all I need. I also broadcast out streaming to the internet at 30 frames a second, so it keeps everything in line and neat and tidy. Okay, so we'll let the GPS configure itself, put the transponder on standby if it isn't already. We're not actually going to program a flight plan, but we're just going to wait for that to fire up. We can obviously go and configure the comm radios if we want to, or the nav radios. We're not going to, unless there are any obvious VORs that we could use. I don't think there are around here, to be honest. Okay, so we can at least test the autopilot. So if we hold the button in, it all lights up and then goes away again. And we can calibrate the altimeter. We can calibrate the direction of gyros. Make sure the parking brake is... Oh, actually, I'm going to wait before we do anything else. We'll just wait for the GPS. There we go. We've got our position now on the map, which is good. Mohammed's asking what resolution I'm running in. 1080p, because I'm broadcasting at 1080p. There's no point in having anything higher. Otherwise it just creates extra workload for the graphics card to downgrade it. I used to run in 4K and I gave up on it because it made no difference. Okay, it looked a bit sharper for me, but that's of no consequence to anybody else. By the same token, it always looks smoother for me than it does on YouTube, because the process of compressing and broadcasting and then decompressing it, you lose some frames. Regardless that I'm nowhere near capping out the GPU. Anyway, and I'm on a fibre to the house connection. I've got 600 megabit up and down synchronous. So yeah, it's... We're not even going to get into that. Okay, so I've done the avionics. Let's go and put the nav lights, the taxi lights on. We could do a engine run-up test. I'm not going to bother. This is a Coronado aeroplane. So we're going to taxi over to the runway. So I'm going to put the head tracking on now. Shall we put our server onto a US server, West USA? Close, resume. Okay, so maybe this was a bad idea. Maybe I will turn multiplayer off. Otherwise we're going to get people trying to fly right in front of me for the entire flight. Just going to go and check the volume levels. So yeah, you can hear me over the top of the engine. That's good. Okay, so I'm going to put the parking brake on. I just want to try something. I want to see what kind of power and RPM I can get at full power. Okay. I was worried about this. Is a very short runway. It's only 1,000 feet. Okay, we should be able to rotate now. And we just make it. Oh, we're right on the stall warning. So gear up. Let the airplane build up some speed. Coming up to 70 knots, 75 knots. So we'll get some altitude and some speed first, and then we'll start manoeuvring. So we want to be going south, so let's turn left. Also right, about 30 degrees. And we're going to head on down towards White Sands. So, Gabot is asking, is this the Coronado V35B? It is indeed. I'm just going to trim it out. So we are, because of the altitude, we're not going to be limited by manifold pressure. But I am going to trim the RPM back. I didn't put the strobes on, did I? I have now. Okay. So you can see the lights out here. If we look on the map, we're heading south towards Alamogordo, and then we'll turn towards Holloman Air Force Base. So Holloman Air Force Base has its own conspiracy theories, much like Roswell and Socorro. So if you believe the stories, something landed here in the 60s. And it was arranged. And if you believe all of the stories, which obviously you can take them with a pinch of salt, then Close Encounters of the Third Kind was loosely based on what might have happened here. It's funny, when I was younger, I read so many books about all of these conspiracy stories. And I think as I've got older, I've become more and more cynical about it. But it would be nice to think that there was some smoke there where there was fire. Or some fire where there was smoke, I should even say. It's just a huge base, isn't it, at Holloman? So obviously we wouldn't be doing this in the real world normally, because this is going to be restricted airspace, I would imagine. So if we go to satellite view, in fact what we could do, if we're clever about this, if I save the flight plan, I'm just going to open Navigraph because it's got the FAA sectionals, hasn't it? So you should get the exclusion zone around the base that I shouldn't be in, and here I am flying along. So yeah, I guess I should have done some research and put the I completely forgot to look up the Holloman Air Force Base incident, but if you go reading any of the online stuff or read any of the books, you'll find the story about it. Of any of the stories of things landing or supposedly landing, whether it was test aircraft or little grey men or whatever, the Holloman one is the one that stacks up. You know, it's the most plausible. Well, that's the way it always seemed to me when I was reading about it years and years ago. I think it may have been part of the Disclosure Project as well. I don't know if any of you have read or seen any of Stephen Greer's. This is loading static aircraft on the ground. I'm going to go and turn them off. I think people loading in to try and fly with me are causing it as well. So what I'm going to do is turn the aircraft traffic off and the ground density to 0, because what it's doing is causing the simulator to stutter badly as it loads aircraft in as we get closer to the airfield. So Magnum's asking if we've flown over the test field by Area 51, where the crater field. Yes. We did a group flight there with Virtual Flight Online some time ago. It's a fascinating place to go visit, isn't it? Should we look at this from outside? So this is Holloman Air Force Base. Okay, so from here we are going to head off at 274 degrees. So I'm going to put the autopilot on. Now there's a bug in this aeroplane. Watch the... actually no, I'll fix this myself. So if we go to 7,000 feet to cruise along it. And we just say vertical speed to get there. And then say, yeah, there, come down. It should stop itself instantly. Is it going to? No, it's not. This aeroplane is not great at the altitude pre-selector doesn't really work properly. So I've told it to come up to 7,500 feet. It's all a bit random. It's not programmed very well. It doesn't behave as an altitude pre-selector should. We're going to go to heading mode, aren't we? We wanted 274 degrees. And go to heading mode. And it looks like we have some broken scenery, which is interesting. Whether that will improve as we get closer to it, I don't know. I've seen a few artifacts in the scenery recently in the simulator. I think it may be to do with 2024 coming. Yeah, there's something badly broken, isn't there? Just in this little area. Okay, so we've levelled out now, altitude hold at 7,500 feet. And we're about 2,400 RPM, so we'll bring that back to 2,300 if we can. There we go. Manifold pressure is absolutely fine. There's a scenery bug going on, isn't there? It's been botched. Because there should be a massive runway out here. Or two massive runways. Scratched into the earth. You wait till you see how big they are. So one of them is 35,000 feet long, the other one's 29,000 feet long. So in terms of miles, just to make you think about that, that runway is 5 miles long. That runway is 6 miles long. There's something badly broken here, isn't there, in the scenery? Hopefully it's just the White Sands area that has this problem. It's almost like there's two layers with an altitude difference in between them, isn't there? So Steve's saying that's the buried UFO city. So we're just coming in south of the runways. I don't think we're going to be able to see them. I don't think it's been modelled. There's a pathway here. I think that's one of them. Which would make that the other one. Etched into the dirt. 5 mile long, yeah, you can see it now, look. a smooth strip in the desert floor. And what they might be landing there, who knows? Or why they would keep it prepared, again, who knows? It could be for things like, you know, there's a Boeing a mini space shuttle that does covert missions. It could be for that. Okay, so we're going to fly out across the mountains straight towards Spaceport, America, to have a look at it. So we should be good for altitude. I'll just come off autopilot when we're a bit closer if we need to. Hopefully that's the end of the scenery aberrations and we can just get on with flying. So I've not seen Spaceport America yet, so it should be interesting. I've never seen a scenery fault like that before. That's an interesting one. It's almost like Minecraft, isn't it? It's quite amusing. Right the way across the lake bed. So yes, anyway, this is the V-35 Baron. No, Bonanza, sorry, get it right. The Beechcraft V-35 Bonanza, or V-35B. Haven't closed the cowl flaps, have I? I don't think it makes any difference, to be honest. All it's going to do is would have cooled the engine if it was simulated correctly, but it isn't, so it won't. Should we scoot across and look at this side? Would you need oxygen in the cockpit at this altitude in real life? No. But it actually depends on... This is going to sound like a strange thing to say. It would depend both on your own experience of knowing your own body, but also if you're male or female. Women tend to have less resistance to altitude than men, or they're more easily affected by it, I should say. There's a really good video on the internet now, is it Baron Pilot? Where he took his, I think she's his fiancée now, I'm not sure. He took his girlfriend at the time up in Baron, and they were at altitude for a leg of the journey, and she was affected by hypoxia. And it affected her that badly that trying to get a cannula and get the oxygen onto her nose, she started to panic, which slowed her down, and it got worse. And it got worse quickly. That was the scary thing. And they actually, you know, made a special feature of it on their YouTube channel to show just how dangerous. Obviously, it wasn't dangerous because he was flying and he was absolutely fine. But it just shows how one person to another, and one day to another, somebody can react completely differently. But no, it tends to be a little bit higher than this that you would start to think about it. We're only at 7.5. Okay, so we're heading towards Spaceport, America. Let's turn off the AI aircraft on the map. Oh, we'll have a look at Navigraph as well, because it gives nice maps on the FAA sectionals, doesn't it? So here's Truth or Consequences, Spaceport, America. What a strange name for an airfield. So Goth Emo Girl is saying that they followed the whole startup for the 737-800 and how the ILS works and managed to do it themselves. Well done. I remember when I first started learning the more complicated aeroplanes, it seemed an uphill struggle at the time, but it's amazing how quickly it all becomes natural, and I think the key is to understand what things do and how it works rather than just blindly flicking switches. Okay, so how far do you think we are above the ground? We haven't got a radar altimeter or radio altimeter in here, have we? Should we just take the autopilot off? Let's hand fly back down. So we can do 160 knots before we get into trouble in the descent, so we'll let it do that. Got a look at the speed building. 150, 155, 160. Okay, let's pull the power back. So I'm presuming Spaceport USA has probably been modelled, hasn't it? Otherwise it wouldn't be highlighted on the map. So we're about 10 miles out. Roughly this direction. And there it is. You can just about see it now. On the way in, should we go and have a look at the ground? We can see the airfield now, so it's easy to get there. I just want to have a look at the vegetation and the modelling of the scrub to see how accurate it, or how realistic it looks. There really is nothing out here, isn't there? So I'm running the simulator. I'm just seeing questions from Goth Emo Girl there. I'm running at 1080p. I'm broadcasting it at 1080p. It is being compressed on the way out. It's running at low latency out of OBS as well. Okay, so this is Spaceport America apparently, but I think, yeah, it hasn't had any special treatment. It's just got an AI shape of a building down there. or at least I presume so. We'll fly overhead and have a look. Okay, so we're going to carry on over to Truth or Consequence. So 306 degrees, 20 miles. And we'll put the altitude back to, just coming up for 6,000 feet. So if we stop it at 6,000, I wonder if it will allow that. It's winding out the vertical speed. It looks like it's going to do it. Good. Okay, so if we have a look over here, KTCS. So we could do a direct 2 to it, couldn't we? So that would give us the countdown then on the distance, or it won't even, because it's not going to. Was there any radio beacons over there? Oh, there is a VOR, look, 11270. Should we have a play with it? So we're on GPS mode at the moment. Let's go and change the CDI then. Oops, wrong button. CDI is that one. So we wanted, what was the frequency again? 11270. Switch it to active, turn the course round, whoops, and we should get distance. Yeah, we've got distance measuring has come alive. It would help if I could keep the mouse on the roller. There we go. So we're going straight towards it, obviously. 17.5 miles to run. No wonder they test secret aeroplanes out here, is it? There really is nothing out here. Just out of interest, how are we doing on fuel between the two sides? Okay, we're going to switch over to the other tank. Just to even it up. So let's have a look at the maps. So I'm not sure that this has got the the restrictions on it, you know. While we're just flying along there, I'm just going to go and have a look. There's Phoenix. There's Las Vegas. So that means Nellis is over here. That would mean that Homey is somewhere up here, isn't it? There should be a big red box though on the map, and it's not there. Cedar City. Mackie Ranch. Let's have a look on LittleNavMap, see if we can figure it out there. There's Las Vegas. Perhaps it's much further north than I'm thinking. Where's the search gone? Okay, my layout has been changed since I last looked at this. There's Homey. Okay, so it's over the border. So it's northwest of Las Vegas. That's why I'm not finding it. Here it is. Yeah, so there's the box. But it's not marked in red. You'd think on the sectional it would be red, wouldn't you? Okay, are we actually at our location that we wanted to go to? Yes, we are. So this is Truth or Consequences Municipal. So we are slowly making our way up towards Socorro, just if you're wondering. Just looking at. These great big dirt strips. I wonder why. So which way is the wind today? Okay, we're perfect. So we can do downwind left approach. Landing lights on. We're just going to do a touch and go, just for something fun to do before we head up to Socorro. VASI lights. They're saying we're a bit high. We can soon fix that. Now they're saying we're a bit low. Okay, so we are going to head off at 13 degrees for 50 miles, which will take us straight over to Socorro, and we'll get to see the first of the UFO sites, and I'll have a little talk about it along the way. So what was the angle again? 13. Up towards 6,000 feet. The engine back to about 2,300 RPM. Landing lights can come back off. Now I think the desert is going to get slowly higher altitude along the way. Let's just double check that on the map. No, we actually will be okay. It's in between Socorro and going out towards the crash sites. Whoa. What happened there? I think it was a glitch on the controls. Let's have a look outside, make sure everything's still in the right place on the aeroplane. What is the outside air temperature at the moment? About 85 Fahrenheit, coming up for 30 centigrade. So it's hot. Whoa. This is a Coronado aeroplane, though. The temperature won't affect the engine in that way. I've just got a glitch on the controls, that's all. Have we got any beacons up here that we can tune in? I guess we could tune into the VOR, or we could do a from the one we were at. So that should be reading it already, actually. So it's going to tick over to 5 miles. Yeah, that's working. So it's saying we're to the right of the 13-degree line, which we are. We'll probably cross over it in a few moments. We'll see the needle sweep in. There, you can see a visualization of it there. If we could do a direct 2 on here, couldn't we, to go up to Socorro? What's the code for it? KONM. There we go. Scenery around here is amazing, isn't it? Yeah, look, you can see the needle is coming in now on the VOR. It's pretty windy out there. The airplane's being thrown around a fair bit. Okay, relax for a few minutes. Oh, I put my head through the back of the seat as I relaxed back there. So while we're on the way, I'm going to read a little bit about the Socorro incident for you. Or the Lonnie Zamora incident. So, without any prejudice, I'm just going to read the story as it's been reported. The Lonnie Zamora incident was an alleged UFO sighting that occurred on April the 24th, 1964 near Socorro, New Mexico, when Socorro police officer Lonnie Zamora claimed he saw two people beside a shiny object that later rose into the air accompanied by a roaring blue and orange flame. Zamora's claims were subject to attention from news media, UFO investigators and UFO organisations, and the US Air Force's Project Blue Book listed the case as unknown. Conventional explanations of Zamora's claims include a lunar lander test by White Sands Missile Range and a hoax by the New Mexico Tech students. So apparently, at approximately 5:45 p.m, Socorro Police radio dispatcher Nep Lopez received a radio call from Sergeant Lonnie Zamora reporting a possible motor vehicle accident. Zamora advised Lopez that he would be checking the car down in Arroyo. Shortly after, Lopez received another radio call from Zamora asking Lopez to look out the window to see if he could see an object. When Lopez asked Zamora to describe it, Zamora said it looks like a balloon and requested New Mexico State Police Sergeant Chavez meet him at his location. When Chavez arrived, he asked Zamora what the trouble was. Zamora led him to examine some burning brush. When other police officers arrived, they noted patches of smouldering grass and brush. So Zamora told authorities he was pursuing a speeding car south of Socorro, New Mexico, when he heard a roar and saw a flame in the sky to the southwest some distance away, possibly a half a mile or a mile. Believing a local dynamite shack might have exploded, Zamora said he discontinued the pursuit and investigated the potential explosion. Zamora claimed to have observed a shiny object to the south, about 150 to 200 yards away. He initially believed to be an overturned white car. The object was like aluminium. It was a white, this is in quotes, like aluminium, it was whitish against the Mesa background, but not chrome, and shaped like a letter O. Zamora claimed to have briefly observed two people in white coveralls beside the object, who he later described as normal in shape. Possibly they were small adults or large children. Zamora claimed to hear a roar and see a blue and orange flame under the object, which then rose and quickly moved away. It's interesting, isn't it? So it either was students messing around, or it was something from White Sands that had unintentionally landed. So Zamora's claims were investigated by Project Blue Book and ufologists, and have been reported in the popular press. Several plausible explanations have been presented. It has also been suggested, it works with the time frame actually, that Zamora witnessed the testing of a lunar landing device by personnel from White Sands. But it's just as plausible that it was students. So there we go. We should be there fairly soon. Let's have a look at the map. How are we doing? Probably need to climb a couple of thousand feet because the ground is slowly coming up to meet us. So what we'll do is switch this back to 8,000 feet. Yeah, Coronado have never corrected the altitude pre-selectors to work properly. They don't give the correct symbology when you arm an altitude. Of course, it may be that there are many different versions of altitude pre-selectors and they've modelled a particular one, which is unlike any of the others that are modelled in other aircraft in the simulator. I guess the story about the lunar lander hardware doesn't really stack up because it wouldn't have been a nice neat shape, would it? Although I guess he didn't know what he was looking at, and your brain can fill a lot of details in for you if you're not sure what you're seeing, can't it? Your brain's good at doing that, filling in patterns with known patterns. Okay. So we're coming up towards Socorro. So when we get there, so it's just past the city. It's just to the south of this road. So we may have some fun and games trying to locate the exact place. So there's a road junction to the east of it. And it's in line with the edge of the town roads. So there's a ridge here we're about to pass over. That's this here, isn't it? So it's just the other side of this bluff by the look of it. Okay, let's put head tracking back on. Okay, what sort of distance do we have? 33 miles from the past VOR, and it's 50 miles, so we're still 20 miles out. Okay. Just going to correct the direction slightly. How are we doing for fuel? We're still on the right tank. We're still not down as low as we were on the left tank. terms of the journey as a whole. Yeah, we're going to need more fuel than that. I'm going to cheat slightly and put some fuel in the tank. I'm going to walk out on the wing with a can of fuel and put some in. So just reading the live stream comments, NM Flyer Robin says, 2.5 hours from the house, Roswell has a neat UFO museum. The Roswell Airport is a boneyard for old airliners. Has a 13,000 foot runway. Shot a back course ILS there years ago. Cool. Oh, hello, Sim's frozen. Let's wait for it to wake up. It's interesting, this sim freezing now and again. I noticed it happened to Two-Tone Murphy on a video I caught of his earlier on. And look, when it came back, it killed the throttle. That's what caused it earlier, look. Sim froze, reset the throttle position, and killed it. Yeah, Roswell's a fascinating story. I guess we'll never find out the truth of what really happened. So even when bits and pieces of it have come out, they've been massively redacted, which means something did happen, but they don't want the public to know about it. Oh, hello, we have company. And what sort of aeroplane is it? Let's have a look. A P-38. But it's showing up as an airliner. So how far will we have to fly across? Okay, we'll have 60 miles to fly to get to Corona. So I'll go, as soon as we've had a look at Socorro and when we're en route to Corona, I'll go make a coffee because we'll have another stretch across the desert. It really is so desolate out here, isn't it? So Amarchi is saying I should go and fly over the Trinity site. I'm not sure how close I am to it. I'd have to look it up on the map. That's New Mexico, isn't it? Trinity. So I've got the crash sites marked on the map for Corona. So there's a debris field, which is exactly here. So this is where the debris field was, and the thing that was found on the ground is even marked on the map. Look, it was against a rocky outcrop near a dirt track. So whatever it was hit the ground here, flew on a bit further and smacked into the ground here and stayed there. There's a set, yeah, we were just been talking about the Corona crash, that the there is a separate incident of another thing that was found northwest of Corona, I think, but it's difficult to pin down. I think a lot of it was like people making up further stories. So, you know, once one story was out, you get people saying, oh, I saw that too, and so on and so forth. Or I've seen one of those. Or okay, so let's go and... So there's the road junction. So it's just to the left of it. So it's here. Yeah, it's right here is where he saw it happen. Now, they've been apparently... There's a story on the internet about the town council, or city council, is it a city or a town? Trying to make the site easier for visitors to get to. So that might be what we can see there, is some sort of formal sign or parking spaces, or I don't know. But that's certainly the location where that white mark is. And you would imagine it would be worn away because of people visiting and parking and taking photographs. And they will have worn the scrub away. So that's the location of where Zamora called in the police report, was here. Wouldn't it be funny if they put a little grey man down there with an egg next to it in the scenery? That would be hilarious. Anyway. So this is Socorro. And we're going to head off east 60 miles across the desert to Corona, and then we'll be in the ballpark to go and find the debris field. .66 degrees we need. So we can probably, what does the altitude plot look like? Yeah, it gets higher, so we're going to need 8,000 feet at least. Open up the RPM. You can't really burn the engines out on the Coronado aircraft, so you can run them flat out. It won't hurt it. So Ollie P is asking what joystick I have. I use the Thrustmaster Captain's Pack, is it called? It's the Airbus stick and throttle quadrant. To be honest, I use the throttles on the throttle quadrant. I don't use any of the switches. Oh, actually, that's a lie. I use the undercarriage switch, except for if I'm flying any of the PMDG 737s, because they are 3-position switches, so I have to disable it all for that. Oh, here we go. Doing on altitude, climbing gently. So if we go and look at the altitude plots, we need to get to 8,500 feet. Okay, let's go and change that slightly then. Presumably to clear that ridge in the distance. So we're heading towards Corona. We've got the direction slightly wrong, haven't we? We want 71. It was 66 miles, 71 degrees. I've gone 66 degrees. So let's put ourselves on a bit of a intercept angle. How much wind have we got going on locally? Okay, we've got a bit of a crosswind as well. So I'm going to put a couple more degrees into that. Change the weather to make it look a bit prettier outside. Might make it a bit more entertaining on the way. Wind it back to earlier in the morning. There we go. Okay. We have company. Okay, so while we're en route to Corona, I am going to go and make a quick coffee, and I'll be back in a few minutes. I'll leave it on this most pretty view of the scrubland going past below us. Hopefully the engine won't die. If it does, I'll be going into slew mode to recover the aeroplane. So, back in a few minutes. I'm back. So, I thought we might have a little talk about the Roswell incident then. I'll start out by reading the Wikipedia page about it. So if you've been living under a rock for the last however many years and you have no idea what the Roswell incident is, I'll just check the volume levels before I start talking. Yes, looking good. Okay, so the Roswell incident is a conspiracy theory that alleges that the 1947 crash of a United States Air Force balloon near Roswell, New Mexico, was actually caused by an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Operated from the nearby Alamogordo Army Airfield and part of the top-secret Project Mogul, the balloon was intended to detect Soviet nuclear tests. After metallic and rubber debris were recovered by Roswell Army Airfield personnel, the United States Army announced their possession of a flying disc. This announcement made international headlines, but was retracted within a day. Obscuring the true purpose and source of the crashed balloon, the Army subsequently stated that it was a conventional weather balloon. So obviously the story goes on and on and on. So if you cut through all of the descriptions of the story and the different versions of it, it's quite, yeah, I'm just going to say, NM Flyer, as mentioned in the live stream comments, there's a good book called Crash at Corona. The basics of the story are that Roswell Army Airfield got a call from a rancher called Mac Brazel that he had found wreckage on his ranch, and he didn't even call it in the same day he collected any of the wreckage. He called it in a couple of days later, and so I'm just getting the names correct. So Jesse Marcel was one of the staff on the base that was sent out to investigate, sent out to go and visit Mac Brazel's ranch, and he collected some of the material and took it back to Roswell with him. And that's what gave rise to the news story, because the nature of the material they collected, they had never seen anything like it before. So for at least one day, the news story ran from the press office at Roswell Army Airfield that they had got wreckage of a UFO. And then, depending on which version of the story you read from then on, the top brass arrive, the crash retrieval team turns up, they collect all the bits, and then they go to the press immediately, and they force Jesse Marcel, to sit in front of the press holding up bits of a weather balloon, which are nothing like any of the things that he described. You know, or things from the original newspaper story. And then the story goes cold for 40 years. Well, no, 30 years, I guess. So in 1978, Jesse Marcel is in hospital. I think he had cancer, but he's not got long to live. And he goes to the press and tells them that story I told you back in the 40s was actually a load of rubbish. So, you know, the things that we had in our hands are not what I took to the press. Anything else beyond that story is open to interpretation, but basically that's the root of the story, is that Jesse Marcel, the guy that went to investigate the ranch, the stuff he brought back were not the same things that he showed to the press. And the problem for the military is that he showed some of the parts to his children, and his children remember it. So beyond all of the hoopla and, you know, the story that came out afterwards about them then going to clean the ranch up and finding the wreckage of a craft. For all we know, it could have been an early, test aircraft or a test rocket. Who knows? But that's the root of the Roswell story. Oh, engine's just gone again. There we go. So we're off towards Corona. The reason that the story became about extraterrestrials it's complicated. The night that the next day when the wreckage was supposed to have been collected, the undertaker in Roswell was called. And this is all, there's a paper trail that follows this. The undertaker in Roswell was called. He was asked to take several small coffins to the Air Force Base. And there were the staff, the Air Force Base was overrun with staff at the time when he arrived with them. He obviously wasn't allowed in to see what they were for. But then everything gets lost in conjecture at that point. But there's a paper trail for that. That the day after they collected the debris, he was asked to go to the Air Force Base with a number of small coffins. Now you could argue, if you want to go and add 2 and 2 together and get 5, you could say this was the HAM project, Holloman. Oh, it's the monkeys that were in the first rockets, the first test subjects. Because that was done out of Holloman, which is only 50 miles away. But to be honest, I read so many books about this story when I was younger, I've probably forgotten more than I can remember. But there's little bits of the story that there are paper trails or people living with memory of the events. The trouble is now it's children of the people that were actually there, so it's second-hand already. And those children are now elderly. I guess the other thing you have to remember is during the 40s and 50s there was a heightened sense of national security because of the Cold War that was beginning to unfold. So things were being locked down forcibly and secrets kept. So who knows how things could get misconstrued in those sort of circumstances. The materials that were collected by Jesse Marcel and described in, obviously by him to the press and by his son who handled the materials, were very light metals that were as light as wood, and a foil type substance, or a very thin substance that resisted being folded. So you could crunch it up, let go, and it would spring back. So the trouble is, if you go back far enough and if you interpret it how you want to, they could have been describing modern materials that the public didn't have. Things like mylar. And they could have been describing titanium for the metal cross beams, or any of the structural pieces, whatever it was they were holding. Who knows? If you don't know what you're looking at, you can't describe it, can you? Well, you can't describe it in terms that we would recognize. Okay, so just around the other side of this bluff is Corona, so I'm going to go manual and fly the aeroplane. Yeah, by far the most interesting story about Holloman I've ever read was the supposed landing there. And I've never researched it because, like, you know, why bother? But the supposed landing that happened at Holloman coincided, and this is where the paper trail gets complicated, and being able to prove what pieces of paper are real. There are travel records of lots of important people being in the area of Holloman on the day it happened. So you figure you add 2 and 2 together and get 5 again. There could be plausible explanations for all of it. Or it could be that that story has been fed and it wasn't true at all. So we go around the other side of this bluff and we'll find Corona, and then we head out from Corona 135 degrees. That takes us to the debris field. It's 15 miles outside of Corona. So we find the first place, whatever it was that crashed, hit the ground and left pieces of itself all over the field. Or there was an explosion. Maybe it didn't immediately hit the ground. Maybe there was an explosion, and I can't remember the descriptions from the visit to the ranch. There is again, whether you believe any of this stuff or not it's all up for debate. There is a story that Mac Brazel, the rancher, was interviewed on the radio, and I think they took this pretty much verbatim in the movie. They recounted the lines, because the guy that interviewed him on the radio lived to a grand old age and told the story as kind of, after it in a story repeatedly. That after they finished their interview on the radio, off the air, he asked Mac Brazel the truth about, what did you actually find out on your ranch? And Mac Brazel is purported to have said, and again this could be an after dinner joke to see how far you can get the story to go, he's purported to have said, they talk about little green men. He said, they ain't green. But again, that could have been the rancher winding everybody up. That could have been the radio interviewer winding everybody up and putting a good story out there. Okay, so this is Corona we're just coming up to. There's nothing here, is there? It's just a blank patch of desert. So we're still about 5 miles out, but it's funny, you read about a place and you kind of form a picture in your head of what it might be like, but it's so desolate out here. And we've been flying for quite some time just to get to this place. I think the only problem with any of these stories of this kind of nature is people. It's the X-Files saying, isn't it? I want to believe, and if people want to believe something, they'll make any evidence at all match their hypothesis in some twisted, contorted way. Okay, so this is Corona. We're just approaching. You can see the town down here. A tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. Should we look at it from outside? It's amazing, isn't it? I wonder why Corona, why the town grew up. I wonder if it was just for farming community originally. So, that sort of thing always fascinates me is, why is there a town here? How would they fund the building of the roads and the rail links potentially to get out here? Why is the infrastructure there? Or was there a much older village on the site previously? Anyway, so we want to be going 135 degrees. So there is a road here, so we'll look that up on the map in a moment. Let's get the aeroplane leveled out. So we follow... No, we don't follow the road. We want 135 degrees. So we're coming down towards 8,000 feet at 500 feet a minute. That's not actually going to do it, is it? It will now. So, we want a few more degrees. And that will put us in the ballpark for where we want to be. So we're almost there. So Magnum is saying, in the UK we had a UFO crash at Rendlesham Forest, next to RAF Woodbridge. Yes, it's the Bentwaters case, isn't it? There were servicemen in the forest looking for whatever was causing the disturbance in the forest, and they saw something. And none of them could ever explain what they saw. The only problem is, every time the story got retold, it got more and more fantastical. Shady makes a good point in the live stream comments. Anyone in the area would have jumped on the alien bandwagon to make a fast buck. Unfortunately, that's true, isn't it? If you can say, I saw something, or this is a picture of something, if somebody wants to believe, you can make them believe all sorts. But yeah, it would be fascinating. I haven't read any of the books about any of this stuff for years and years, decades. It would be fascinating to see if there is any new books or new research or information that's come out of Freedom of Information requests, maybe, though I very much doubt it. It was fascinating when the X-Files was originally on the TV back in the early 90s. That coincided with the explosion of the internet and the World Wide Web and bulletin boards and forums and all the rest of it. So a few years before the scriptwriters got hold of the X-Files, there was a system on the internet before the World Wide Web really took off called Usenet, news groups. And before that, there were bulletin boards. And there was, and before that, there was IRC. And in between all of those systems, various collections of documents did the rounds, or I say documents, text files did the rounds, purporting to be transcripts of real documents. And pretty much everything that was in that first season of the X-Files to do with spaceships and little grey men and all the rest of it came out of those texts. So if you had been on the internet in the early days and read some of the alt.ufo forums and things like that, or groups, Usenet groups, you pretty much had all of the basis of the X-Files TV show. Right, we're coming in on the debris field. We're within 5 miles of it. I drew 5-mile range rings on it. So we will see a dry riverbed. So let's get to altitude. It's going to be here, isn't it? There's a fork in the road, it's the opposite side. There's a road, there's a junction. So is that the junction? So if that's the junction, it's there. That would be the field, where the debris field was. I think it's this area. Have we got the dotted line on? Yes, we have. So if we circle the area. So this is the debris field near Roswell, between Socorro and Roswell. Of where stuff was found on the ground. Yeah, we've got it. That's the field. So let's have a look out the window. We want head tracking on, don't we? So Magnum's saying, I wonder if the X-Files have aged well. I watched it with my kids when they were a bit younger. It's still very, very good. I think a lot of the more wacky stories haven't done so well, but the conspiracy theory stuff has aged really well. Because the conspiracy theories haven't really changed. The whole thing about MJ12, or the Robertson panel, whatever you want to call it, is still, you know, conjecture that's alive and well. But all the conspiracies about a secret government have been going on for decades that, you know, quite apart from about concealing evidence of extraterrestrials, the whole World Bank conspiracy is the same thing. You know, the Rockefellers and all the rest of it, and a government above the government. But yeah, so there you go, that's the debris field. I wonder how many people go out there with metal detectors trying to find anything. Okay, so we're going to carry on, 133 degrees again, and find the crash site. So it should be a bit easier to find because there's a bluff that the airplane or the craft crashed into. So it's just over here. So 133 degrees, 7 miles to run. We should make a data file, a scenery file with points of interest of conspiracy theories or something, shouldn't we? That would be quite cool. So you can go and do a tour of them. Okay, so I believe there is some sort of plaque on the ground down here that was installed. Whether it's in the simulator, I don't know. But I think a memorial has been put, you know, like a visit, obviously for tourism purposes. But I believe there's a stone tablet. I only found this out a few minutes ago before I started the video up. I was reading, trying to find the locations, and that's when I discovered that there was a stone tablet on the ground. So, do we have anything in the way of features to go on? Not really. See, I wonder where this is the actual place, because you'd have expected more of an outcropping near it. It's suspiciously near a road. So it's going to be along here somewhere, I think. To the left of me, over here. Maybe this is it, where there's the exposed side of the hill, because it was in the side of a hill apparently, if the stories are true. Yeah, that would seem to be right, wouldn't it? So it's somewhere around here. But again, this could just be that there's a dirt track and there's a tourist attraction that's been set up here. See, now I don't know if this is right, because the bits and pieces of story that have crept out over the years of whatever it was, whether it was a test plane or a rocket or whatever, imply it was on the side of a hill, or an outcrop. It wasn't on a plane. So there you go, this is where it would have been found, I guess. It's actually there, not over here. So there you go, middle of nowhere, in the middle of ranch land. Something crashed, supposedly, out here 70 years ago now. Or nearly 70 years ago. Okay, shall we carry on? 55 miles to Roswell itself. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, there was no story until Jesse Marcel became sick and went to the press. It had been a weather balloon for 30 years at that point, and then he blew the story wide open. And he had no reason to do so. So you can figure that one out yourself. So let's go and arm vertical speed 500 feet a minute up to 8,000 feet. And we ought to go and change the fuel over to the other tank. And we can go and program this onto the GPS. So we want KROW. There we go. And there's a VOR down here, 11610. Direct headwind. Okay. So Roswell has a good steakhouse, apparently. Let me see if I can find out while we're flying along. We've got a few minutes. I'm going to do a bit of research and see if I can find out the Holloman AFB landing. Here we go. 1970s. So I don't know the veracity of who these people are. Robert Emenegger and Alan Sandler of Los Angeles, California were in contact with officials at Norton Air Force Base. So let me just check the volume levels before I start talking. I'm going to turn the airplane down a bit now. So it's called the Emenegger documentary that was made in 1973. So these filmmakers were in contact with officials at Norton Air Force Base in order to make a documentary film. Emenegger and Sandler report that Air Force officials, including Paul Shartle, whoever that was, suggested incorporating UFO information in the documentary, including as its centerpiece a genuine piece of footage. I've read about this before, or heard about it. A genuine piece of footage of a 1971 UFO landing at Holloman Air Force Base. Furthermore, says Emenegger, he was given a tour of Holloman Air Force Base and was shown where officials had conferred with aliens. That gets a bit ridiculous at that point, doesn't it? This was supposedly not the first time the US had met. See, if this was a true story, it would have exploded all over the world, but why hasn't it? So where's the discounting of it? The documentary was released in 1974 as UFOs Past, Present and Future, narrated by Rod Serling. It contains only a few seconds of the Holloman UFO footage, the remainder of the landing depicted with illustrations and reenactments. Emenegger's 1973, this is what I was saying earlier, Emenegger's 1973 depiction of a landing at Holloman is widely noted for its striking similarities to Spielberg's 1977 depiction of a landing at Devil's Tower in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In the 2013 documentary Mirage Men, ufologist Richard Dolan discussed the Emenegger documentary, saying, "I have wondered if that film, I think as many people have wondered, was an abortive attempt at some kind of disclosure." I think that's wishful thinking, but there you go. So the Wikipedia page goes on then to talk about J. Allen Hynek. He was a government plant that was used to debunk UFO stories. In order to protect national security, because obviously some of those UFO stories were talking about things like stealth aircraft and whatever that the public had no idea about at the time. So yeah, J. Allen Hynek is famous apparently for the whole swamp gas explanation for a whole city seeing something they shouldn't have. But yeah, I've heard stories around that Emenegger documentary before, and I've read it in a book years and years ago. That's rung a bell. There's been various stories over the years about organised, or again I think it's wishful thinking, but organised disclosure programs where the government was going to come clean about or prepare the public for something. I think it's just wishful thinking though, as if any government would ever do anything like that. It's just a nice story, isn't it? It's an interesting story. Okay, this is just remarkable, isn't it though? We're flying for miles and miles over almost nothing. So there's another story, a more credible one, about Holloman, about Gordon Cooper. Oh no, it's Edwards, sorry, not Holloman. In 1981, Gordon Cooper, that's one of the Mercury astronauts, reported that he had seen developed negatives of film taken at Edwards Air Force Base in 1957 of some sort of craft, and the photographers and another witness confirmed the story, because he could obviously name the people who were there with him when it was recorded. Cooper said military authorities picked up the film and neither he nor the photographers ever heard what happened to it. So it could be, though, that they were seeing an aircraft, a test aircraft, that they didn't know about. Just because he's an astronaut doesn't mean he has a high security clearance, does it? So the official explanation was the photographers had filmed a weather balloon distorted by the hot desert air. So yeah, the same page goes on to talk about Majestic 12 and all the rest of it. It's almost the running order for the X-Files TV series. So then you get Bob Lazar and Area 51 and all the rest of it. It's quite amusing, really. So Magnum mentions in the livestream comments Cooper's treasure map. So come on then, tell us about Cooper's treasure map. I don't think I've seen this story. So we're almost at Roswell now, almost at the end of our journey. We're about 20 miles away. So yeah, Burnley Nut says, besides, isn't it slightly ironic that the whole contact landing thing happened to be in America? A whole planet to go at, and they picked the US. Well, there's more to it than that. Roswell was the first base with nuclear bombers in the world. It was the first nuclear arsenal and the first aircraft carrying nuclear weapons. White Sands were the first tests of nuclear missiles. If you watch any of the Disclosure Project, a lot of the unexplained craft in the air near installations, it's almost always near nuclear facilities. So you could say it's a foreign power doing it, but it's again, it's down to interpretation all of a sudden. So Magnum says this is about Cooper's treasure. Orbiting in space, he had equipment that he could see shipwrecks around the world, so he went gold diving. That's fantastic. Oh, I'm going to have to go and have a read about that now. That sounds like a good story. Okay, so should we come into Roswell on the ILS in a few minutes? So we want 109.9, 215 degrees. Uh, 215. So I'm just setting up the Omni bearing selector. Oh, there, it's an HSI, isn't it? The coarse needle. to point at the runway direction relative to us. So we are coming in almost to one side, but we'll go and have a look at Roswell first. But we've just got the ILS set up. And interestingly, even at a right angle to it, it's still the DME is picked up correctly. So we're flying along on heading mode, by the way. That's why messing around with the radio hasn't affected it at all. We're in VLOC mode on the GPS. I want to go and buy a book now and go and read up on all these conspiracy stories. Go and find out what the modern take on it all is. Because obviously my knowledge is from the early days of the internet when the conspiracy stories were coming out of everywhere. And they were, 90% absolute hogwash. Have you heard the story about the empty barn? There was nothing in it. No, that's a proper dad joke, isn't it? Okay, so we can see Roswell coming up. And there it is. Out in the plains. It's very flat around here, isn't it? Should we put the head tracking back on? So we'll circle over Roswell and have a look at it. And then we'll come back into the airfield. So yeah, so Roswell Army Airfield was one of the first nuclear capable squadrons in the world. And I guess the reason it was called Roswell Army Airfield is because, yeah, if you go back far enough, it was the Army Air Force. The services didn't split. I think until after the war. I'm sure someone from the US watching can fill in on the years that happened. I remember reading about the development of the internet falls into the same kind of story with the Advanced Research Projects Agency, and that was part of that whole thing as well, with the various services splitting away from each other. Yeah, because if you didn't know, the internet that we now know is basically the grandchild, or the child then, of a military project. But the military project was fatally flawed. So what we now know as the internet had lots of its problems solved. So the ARPANET, the first version of the ARPANET wasn't very clever. The way it was done wasn't very clever. I'm not going to get into it. I'll bore everybody to tears if I start talking about network protocols and packet switching and it's a fascinating story to me, but probably not to anybody else. So Roswell's quite big, isn't it? Just ascending down, we're going to circle over the town before we go into the airport. So there we go, look, USAF created September 47. Before that it would have been the Army Air Force. I'm too high to see at the moment. This is photogrammetry. So yeah, Roswell's a huge place, isn't it? And it appears to have some custom 3D structures going on. So there's the airbase, oh sorry, the international airport. Let's go and fly over to it. So Goth Emo Girl is mentioning the flat earthers. Well, of course the Earth's flat. It's a circle, it's a disc shape, balanced on the back. Now, how many elephants is it balanced on? And they're standing on the back of a giant turtle that flies through space. I thought everybody knew that. If anybody thinks I've lost the plot, you need to read the Discworld books. They are wonderful. Can you fly over Roswell in real life? I don't see why not. It's a normal town. And this is a normal civilian airport these days. It's not an Army Air Force base as far as I'm aware. Roswell International Air Center. I'm sure you can find out the history of it online. So yeah, just reading Magnum's comment there about Cooper's treasure, I think I might have to go and find that as well. That's a really interesting story. You can tell this was a huge base. It would have had B-29s in it in the late 40s. And then I imagine B-36 is following that. But you can see from the size of the runways, it was built to deal with the big bombers, wasn't it? Obviously we have no business landing this tiny little thing here. We can probably slow right down and come off at the first exit. That's what you call landing in very thin air. Well, we're only at 3,500 feet though. That was incredible actually. That just sank into the ground. I might need to go and check that the undercarriage isn't broken. Driverless coach with no passengers. Yeah, obviously I don't have the accurate version of Roswell International. No doubt you can download it online from somewhere. I'm going to bring my little aeroplane to a halt. Oh, that's Marion. So there we go. That was our little aeroplane that we've been flying around chasing little grey men. Oh, there's a huge hangar over there, look. So maybe it has got some of the military stuff still on the base. But yeah, this would have been a B-29 base back in the day, I guess. Carrying atomic weapons and doing the whole long-term or long-range missions up over the north of America and Canada, and would have been crazy missions, I guess. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you've enjoyed that this evening. So we went from Holloman, and went flying over White Sands. We found a huge scenery anomaly, didn't we? Flew over Spaceport, and then we went up around Socorro, Corona, and then over the supposed crash site of whatever it was that crashed in the 40s. And we talked a bit about the history of it along the way, with a healthy dose of skepticism. So Goth Emo Girl saying, would I do more of these? I think I'm going to, because I think it's more fun if we do kind of go somewhere interesting, and I'll do a little bit of research and talk about the place. So yeah, we can go to Devil's Tower next, I guess, and talk about the time Richard Dreyfuss climbed on a spaceship. No, seriously though, yeah, definitely do more of this sort of thing. If there's interest in it, I'll do it. Cool. I'm going to leave it there. I need to go sleep. See you all again soon. Take care.